reaction to circumstance, but rather it was an effort to undermine something systemically. He looked at the argument that the Parliament had raised that the working arrangements and the working needs of the Parliament have shifted from a need for plenaries to a need for committee sessions, typically held in Brussels. And he said, well, okay, that may well be true, but if that's true, why hasn't this change applied across the calendar? It hasn't been coherently applied across all 12 sessions. Something is focused on this one session, which didn't seem to him to make sense. So he said that there was something not quite consistent with the overall will of the member states. So on balance, he felt that it was an effort to undermine the will in this particular case. So the point I'd like to make is that even if the court follows the Advocate General's opinion, which isn't at all clear that it will, but even if it does, that does not mean that the Parliament retains no discretion to make changes. It certainly does retain power to make changes, as it has done before and as it can do in the future. The requirement, though, will be that it makes changes coherently, which might mean that provided it makes the same change to all plenary sessions across the calendar, the coherence requirement would be met. So, for example, if the Parliament were to decide that it didn't need a Thursday session, this hypothetical example, and that were applied across the board, that would be consistent with the reasoning that the Advocate General has proposed. So the point I'd like to make is that even if the court goes the way the Advocate General has suggested, lots of discretion remains, and the Parliament does already have significant discretion to adjust its working arrangements. Very, very quickly, the second point I'd like to address is the possibility of treaty change. Now, in the Lisbon Treaty, new provisions were put in which give the Parliament the ability to initiate a treaty change, to trigger a requirement for Council to consider a treaty change. It's in Article 48 of the Treaty on the European Union. Very quickly, what happens is that the Parliament can simply take a decision that it wishes to initiate the procedure. That goes to Council. Council must take a decision by a qualified majority on how to deal with that. And it can it can choose about whether to involve a conference of member states or not, but ultimately must come up with a position, and that position must be considered by a conference of representatives, an intergovernmental council in effect, and they must reach a decision by common accord. That might sound very complicated and difficult, but in fact the treaty change provisions have been used already quite a number of times since even Lisbon came into effect. It was used, for example, to establish the European Stability Mechanism regarding the accession of Croatia. There's an Irish protocol which is in about, but most importantly, there has already been a treaty change relating to the workings of Parliament, and that was the treaty change which allowed the expansion of the number of MEPs by 18. And that was already triggered through Article 48. So it's not impossibly complicated, provided the will is there. So the key message is, if the will is there, the treaty will not stand in the way of a change to a single seat. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ken. We need to move on. I've asked my colleagues from the single-seat steering group to make a brief statement, a challenging one, starting with Göran Färm.
Thank you, Edward. I think the main significance of the vote yesterday was not just that it was a bigger majority than before, but mainly that we're now entering into a new, more concrete phase in the single-seat campaign. Because we're no longer asking just simply for having a single seat. Now we're demanding that the issue must be raised seriously in the upcoming MFF negotiations, in the upcoming treaty revisions, and that a roadmap for this to happen should be established. It's a much more concrete phase than just asking for a single seat. However, I mean, even if we now do open the possibility for a single seat in a new treaty, we of course have to realize we cannot just move and leave the rest to the city of Strasbourg. We have to find something which is good, take a serious responsibility for the future of Strasbourg and Alsace. There are ways to do this, I think, without the costs and environmental impact of the present situation. Let me quote Margot Wallström, the former commissioner. She said, "Something that was once a very positive symbol of the EU reuniting France and Germany has now become a negative symbol of wasting money, environment, bureaucracy, etc." And that is really true. I believe that there are ways to do this that would in fact be better for Strasbourg, that would benefit the citizens, the hotels, the restaurants, not just 3 days a month, but every week. My favorite proposal would be moving the Committee of the Regions and the Economic and Social Committee from Brussels to Strasbourg. This has several advantages. First of all, they would need the same type of building as the European Parliament, as they also have plenary sessions, they have committee meetings, group meetings, etc. It would also free up important office space in Brussels, adjacent to the European Parliament, for future needs of the EU institutions, without having to build anything new in Brussels. And it would be visible and prestigious for Strasbourg, because some of the leading political personalities from EU's major cities, regions would come regularly to the Committee of the Region meetings, and so would trade union leaders, business leaders for the Economic and Social Committee activities. I think that would be the most practical solution. But of course, there are other options as well. Cecilia suggested the creation of a kind of city of peace. There has been a lot of discussions and also concrete proposals on making this Strasbourg a true European legal centre by moving important EU institutions to Strasbourg or placing new ones here. Why not, for example, place the new patent court here instead of the stupid split between 3 different countries, having one part in London, another in Paris and a third in Munich. Frankly, that's not very wise. Put it in Strasbourg instead. Would be much better. There may well be other solutions. I know that our colleague Marisa Matias, who should have been here, will suggest in one of her reports also research institutions that could be placed in Strasbourg, and I think there are others as well. But the main thing is, let us now focus on a practical way forward, not just for the European Parliament, but also for Strasbourg, because there is no way this issue will go away. Thank you.
Thank you, Göran. Ashley Fox.
Thank you, Edward. Everyone has said that Strasbourg was a symbol of peace in 1958. Indeed it was. And now it is a symbol of all that is wrong with the EU. I'd like to concentrate on how we amend the treaty. And as Ken Daly explained, there are 2 ways of amending the treaties that oblige us to be here. The European Parliament can initiate the change, or the European Council can initiate that change. Now, I'm going to take issue with Monsieur Quatremer when he said this isn't a question of France against the others, because I'm afraid I think it is. In both cases, we need to overcome French resistance, because the French government has used every tool at its disposal to prevent this subject even being debated. When I first came to this Parliament in 2009, I wanted a debate on 2 seats. And it was explained to me that this couldn't happen without the Conference of Presidents giving its say-so. And of course, Monsieur Daul and his friend Herr Schulz ensured that there never was a debate. It was impossible to have a debate on the subject. So I turned my mind as to how I could have a debate by proxy. And that's when I struck on the idea of using the calendar as a way of expressing our discontent. So in 2011, I proposed that we hold 2 sessions in 1 week, and that was defeated by 100 votes. And I was very surprised. Why did this happen? Because all the MEPs I spoke to were in favour of 1 seat. And of course the reason it was defeated was the pressure of the party whips. People were frightened. Enormous amount of pressure was put on EPP and S&D colleagues not to allow a debate and not to vote in favour of having 1 seat. So my name is Fox. I read the rules of procedure and came up with a cunning device to ensure there could be a discussion. We'd have a secret ballot. So 12 months later, the same amendment came up with a secret ballot, and lo and behold, we won by 100 votes. And since that secret ballot, the terms of the debate have changed. And we now see a huge majority across the Parliament, and even a majority in the EPP in favour. So how do we now get our treaty change? Well, first of all, within the Constitutional Affairs Committee, the coordinators have agreed we should have a report on changing the Constitution. Members might be surprised at this. Why haven't we heard of it? Well, the answer is it's stuck with the Conference of Committee Chairs. who for 2 months have had this request, and Mr. Lehner is sitting on it and not allowing it to proceed in its normal way. And what we see behind the scenes is that Monsieur Daul is using every power that he has available to stop this report coming forward. Now, I'm sure it's going to happen eventually, but there are very powerful forces at work preventing a debate on any terms. The second way we get our treaty change is through the Council, and we need a member state to put it before the Council and ask for a debate. And here's the problem. Because when I talk to the British Minister for Europe, David Lidington, he agrees with me. Isn't this disgraceful? Yes, Minister, would you put it on the agenda? Oh, well, much hand-wringing. That might offend the French. Well, forgive me, they will always be offended. This is a subject where people have to have the courage of their conviction and say, the French are very good about talking of the need of European cooperation, except when their national interest is at stake, and then they refuse any debate at all. So within the United Kingdom, I've put forward a petition, an e-petition. If we get 100,000 British citizens to sign that, there has to be a debate in the House of Commons. And I think that will force the debate. And what I'd ask is that in all the other nation states, if there are methods of forcing your governments to put this on the agenda, please do so. Because people are afraid of causing offence, and we have been afraid for too long, and it's now time to take some action. Thank you.
Oui. Je voudrais juste réagir parce que c'est exactement le genre, votre intervention me choque parce que à mon avis, c'est le meilleur moyen d'aller droit dans le mur. Parce que si on s'envoie nos intérêts nationaux à la figure, moi je peux vous dire que la Grande-Bretagne, par exemple, n'a pas brillé par son sens de l'économie budgétaire en se battant comme une chienne pour obtenir une partie du tribunal des brevets. Je voudrais juste le dire. Rappelons aussi la bataille des sièges pour l'EBA, etc. Donc chaque État membre a le fond de la culotte pas très propre. Donc c'est pour ça que personne ne veut monter à l'arbre. C'est quand on monte à l'arbre, il faut avoir le fond de la culotte propre. Donc moi je suis contre cette approche-là. Je suis totalement opposé à cette approche-là. Il ne faut pas avoir une approche, c'est la France contre les autres, le Luxembourg est derrière, la Belgique joue aussi un jeu qui n'est pas tout à fait correct, en construisant des hémicycles qui ne sont pas destinés normalement au Parlement, etc. Ça, c'est le meilleur moyen pour que tout le monde se braque et dise « ça ne changera pas ». Donc je pense à la fois la guérilla juridique ou cette guérilla sur le thème « oui, les forces puissantes françaises », mais ça, vous allez dans le mur, parce que la France dira non et ça ne changera pas. Donc il faut plutôt prendre ça positivement. Je préfère l'approche de votre collègue suédois qui dit « trouvons une solution pour offrir quelque chose à Strasbourg qui soit quelque chose, effectivement, qui fasse plaisir à la France, parce qu'après tout, la France a le droit d'avoir une institution, c'est un pays fondateur, une institution dont elle peut être fière. Les Allemands se sont battus pour avoir la Banque Centrale Européenne, personne n'a trouvé que c'était scandaleux que l'Allemagne réclame la Banque Centrale Européenne. Personne n'a dit on va dépenser l'argent du contribuable. On a dit bravo, oui, ils doivent l'avoir. En Suède, on s'est battu pour avoir des agences. En Italie, on s'est battu pour avoir des agences. Donc ne rentrons pas dans ce débat-là, parce que là, vous allez le tuer, c'est certain. Si c'est la France contre les autres, personne ne gagnera.
Thank you, Jean. He's a very moderate moderator. Now,
and totally unbiased.
Now, I should have explained Ashley is a lawyer. Now to another lawyer, Judith Merkies, is very close to the Dutch Labour Party. Judith.
Yes, and we in the Netherlands, my party and your party, are trying to find a coalition, and which is very interesting because both parties have very prominently in their election campaign and in the program that the Parliament should have one seat in Brussels. The whole problem is that the last coalition had the same point in their coalition program, but unfortunately, when it came to the court case, because of your foxy proposal, and there was a possibility to side with the Parliament, the former government decided not to do so. So there is the option now to change all this. And coming last, I have the privilege of trying to mediate between all the different opinions of the panel. I think that what we see is that there are options, as very well listed by colleague Pham. Indeed, there is the option to have the Committee of the Regions or any other institution. By the way, isn't it time to have a review of all the institutions and their functions and their need? Because I think that if we talk about finance, then we have not only costs to spare in Strasbourg, but many other as well. Then we have the possibility of turning Strasbourg into a court city more than it is already, with a patent court, as you were very well listed, or as the Matthias proposal proposed, have the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, which might be a very interesting idea, because we have these rooms already. This involves students. This involves the big dream of Barroso was to have an EIT, to have our own MIT as we have in Boston, and to have a shining example of the innovative mind of the Europeans. Well, if this is the real European idea of having something really innovative and shiny, then Strasbourg, indeed being the very essence of Europeanness, might be very nice. The whole, so that we have the spirit in the Parliament. We apparently have spirit already in national member states. Unfortunately, indeed, not landed yet in governments. So we have alternatives, and we have all the good reasons. Although I agree with you that even though this is a time of austerity, the financial reason is not the foremost reason. Of course, the foremost reason is that if this Parliament represents the citizen, and if the citizen has indicated through their political programs or by petitions, unfortunately we cannot accept that petition, but there have been many voices raised by citizens about this Parliament, and that if this is the citizens' opinion, why are we not allowed to implement the citizens' wish in our own Parliament? And is it not that this Parliament is permanently criticized for not representing the citizen, that we are not close to the people? And that is, so this I think is the foremost reason that if we want to be a real representative body, we must be able to decide ourselves about what the wishes are and how we want to implement that. So Strasbourg is a city of regional cooperation, and we don't want to bang into a wall, as you have said. So the solution then is to convince somebody in the French government that it is a very good idea for Strasbourg to change. And that is something that I really want to ask you, because the best campaign is always the campaign that comes from within, and not the campaign where we bang the doors that remain shut until we find an alternative. And as everybody is afraid of upsetting the big countries in the European Union, how do we convince the French government to change? Is that by indeed offering alternatives? How do we keep that a national pride? And I think that is not by trying to offer them something which we ourselves think that is inferior or mediocre. I do not refer to any institution, but but by really offering something that would really replace the importance of this Parliament and really mean something for this region. So we must not take this too lightly and think that we can just push away a few of the institutions to Strasbourg. This must really be an alternative, and I think that we sometimes think of that too lightly. Thank you.
Je vais passer la parole à la salle, mais simplement pour répondre en partie à votre question, pour moi l'attachement des différents gouvernements, de gauche, de droite, de l'extrême gauche à l'extrême droite, à Strasbourg, est un mystère. Parce que si vous posez la question à l'opinion publique française, je suis sûr que tous les Français, majoritairement, ne préféreraient que le Parlement européen soit regroupé effectivement, à Bruxelles pour des raisons pratiques. Il y a une région qui n'est pas d'accord, c'est l'Alsace. Et l'Alsace a un poids politique considérable en France. Donc ce qu'il faut convaincre, ce sont plus les Alsaciens, je dirais, que les Français. C'est ça la réalité locale, en réalité, c'est ça qui pèse actuellement dans le débat. Donc j'ai répondu partiellement, et vous avez raison, je pense que si la presse, petit à petit, se met à dire, écoutez, là, il y a quand même un problème massif, énorme, il faut que ça change, les gouvernements, peut-être, envisageront la question, mais pas dans le cadre, à mon avis, d'une guérilla juridique, plus dans le cadre d'un changement des traités, et c'est au moment du changement des traités que les choses, à mon avis, pourront bouger. Les questions, voilà, monsieur et monsieur.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I'm very attracted, actually, by Mr. Ferm's suggestion that we relocate the Committee of the Regions and ECOSOC in Strasbourg, although, speaking personally, I'd rather abolish them altogether. But actually, our last speaker, I think, hit it completely on the head, that we have to, in a way, compensate Strasbourg for the loss of the Parliament here. And I've long argued that in terms of the symbolic nature of Strasbourg, that something like the equivalent of MIT or Caltech, based here as it were, the generator of new innovation, new research and so on, would actually be a very practical and successful way of allowing Strasbourg to maintain that particular kudos, as it were. So yes, I'm very much in favour of not just saying, well, let's get rid of Strasbourg, give Strasbourg something in return, but the practicality I come back to is that we can no longer justify having 3 official seats of this Parliament.
Thank you. My name is Fernando Morales de la Cruz. I'm the father of 2 European girls, one French and the other one German. Actually, one born in Strasbourg, of Spanish passport, I should clarify. But the reason why I would like to intervene is only because, adding to the discussion of what would be best for Europe, I would always like to say what would be best for my daughters and the daughters of all people in Europe. And when you look at the list of the best universities of the world, if you start from the top down, not one is in Europe until you get to what number? 15, 16, 17, 20? It depends which ranking. But Europe doesn't have one of the top 5 universities in the world. And of course, nothing is more important for the future of Europe than the top quality professionals. And so what Strasbourg needs, what France needs, and what Europe needs is the best university in the world. And this building, actually, probably Harvard would love to have it. MIT would love to have it, but also I think the Europeans deserve to have a university that can be better than Harvard and MIT. And it's a question of money, and just to close it down, Harvard has 21,000 people studying, plus all the people that work there. So for Strasbourg and for Kehl and for all the area would be great, but the budget of Harvard is $3.7 billion. So keep that in mind, because you can't compete with Harvard with no money. But wasting money is actually the best way to let Harvard, MIT, Princeton, and all the other universities, Yale and whatever, beat you. Thank you.
Madame.
Thank you very much. Sarah Ludford from the ALDE group, and I'm afraid another Brit. My preferred solution is something that does indeed build on the critical mass in Strasbourg for institutions of peace and human rights and the rule of law, which is the Council of Europe and the European Court of Human Rights. And I think, I mean, to be honest, what I'd really love to see is the Court of Justice of the European Union relocate to Strasbourg, and they could share this building, share their resources. The Strasbourg court is horribly underfunded, and so they could cut out duplication in terms of some of the support services. They could use these as courts, these rooms as courts. I realise that brings in the Luxembourg question, and so it may be a non-starter, but to me, peace is built on human rights and the rule of law. I think that also would be a very adequate and distinguished role for Strasbourg to have. Very appropriate, since the EU is negotiating its accession to the convention, so you would bring together the EU and the Council of Europe and help validate the Council, which sometimes the EU can be a bit snobby about, to be honest. And so I take the point about a university or a research institute And of course, we have to bear in mind the whole factor of Strasbourg. Maybe that's what people mean when they refer to the region. I mean, the economy of Strasbourg, they've got us by the short and curlies, as we say, in terms of our hotels and costs and so on. And we have to sign up for the whole year and so on. But at least prestigious institutions would also help the local economy.
Dernière intervention et courte parce qu'on a déjà dépassé le temps imparti. Voilà.
Je vais faire plus court que court alors. Il me semble que le débat sur les alternatives possibles est un petit peu mettre la charrue avant les bœufs. L'essentiel ici, effectivement, c'est le changement de traité, donc le changement de mentalité qu'il implique. Alors, je suis bien d'accord avec Jean Quatremer, ça ne devrait pas être la France contre tous, mais c'est la France contre tous. Et je me fais écho à ce que Mme Merkis a dit. Effectivement, le changement doit venir de l'intérieur. Simplement, moi, je ne crois pas à un changement qui viendrait des politiques, et notamment de l'Assemblée nationale en France. Et j'ai envie très brièvement de vous raconter une anecdote. J'en ai parlé il y a quelques années avec Mme Simone Veil, qui, dans son livre de mémoire, en page 82, en tout petit en bas et en 2 lignes, en tant qu'ancienne présidente du groupe libéral, mais surtout du Parlement européen, se prononce effectivement pour le siège unique, c'est important. Et je me souviens, elle lui avait dit, mais Madame Veil, vous qui êtes une icône, qui ne devez plus être élue, qui n'avez pas le guidon de prochaines élections devant vous, et elle m'a répondu, je m'en souviendrai toujours, Frédéric, personne ne le peut, je ne le peux pas, aucun politique français jamais n'ira contre ça. Raison pour laquelle je dis ce changement de mentalité doit venir de l'Alsace, mais il doit venir effectivement de la France, et c'est la raison pour laquelle, et on arrive au 3e panel, on ne se refait pas, je suis journaliste, je resterai, je pense qu'effectivement nous devons trouver des moyens de mobiliser l'opinion française, parce que l'opinion française, et Jean Quatremer l'a dit, quand on en parle, parce que de nombreux Français maintenant sont chaugnés au Bruxelles, on le sait, c'est un autre débat, mais elle est d'accord avec nous, et ces raisons qu'on a évoquées, qui sont des raisons financières, mais des raisons politiques aussi, elle les partage avec nous. Donc il appartient aux politiques, effectivement, mais aux citoyens de se saisir de cette question-là et de la faire remonter et de forcer le politique français à enfin accoucher. Et je suis sûre que la diplomatie française, elle a le plan B en question, elle a la solution, parce qu'elle est prête, elle sait que ce changement est inéluctable. Donc je suis sûre qu'il est dans les cartons.
Je crois que je vais en parler à Bernard Arnault, justement, qui va bientôt s'installer à Bruxelles, d'après ce qu'on dit. Et qui a donc voté pour Bruxelles et pas pour Strasbourg. Je crois qu'on est obligé donc de clore maintenant et de laisser la place au troisième panel. De toute façon, je crois qu'il y a un ou deux diplomates français présents dans la salle, parce que je vois que ça tweet du côté français. Donc le message, je crois, est passé. Il y a des alternatives, il y a une demande, et il y a, à mon avis, aussi une demande de l'opinion publique. Et j'espère que ce message sera relayé à destination de l'Élysée, parce que vous savez qu'en France, c'est l'Élysée qui décide de tout en réalité.
Okay. Merci. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Ashley. Judith, many thanks. Thank you, Ken. And thank you, Yora. We now move to the last session, Getting Citizens on Board, 2014, and the case for a single seat in the electoral campaign. And we're going to be joined by David Earnshaw, who is the Managing Director of Burson Marstella in Brussels, pro bono advisor to single seat, and visiting professor of the College of Europe in Brussels. And Anna Corazza-Bildt, Swedish EPP colleague, Dan Jorgensen from S&D in Denmark, and Diane Dodds, who is a non-attached member from the UK. Lika. We're missing a moderator. Ah, well, I'll have to keep going. We hope to be joined by Lucas de Vos, who is from VRT Radio in Belgium. I know he's here somewhere. So we're going to start with a video by Danny Alexander, who is the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, United Kingdom. Please run the video.
Ladies and gentlemen, the issue of the single seat is a totemic one for some. But for me, it is a simple matter of responding to the democratic will of the people in changing times. For it cannot be justifiable in the current economic climate for 750 MEPs to have to move their entire operation several hundred miles every month, at a high economic and financial cost, not to mention the needless carbon emissions produced as a result. As a pro-European party, the Liberal Democrats believe in the economies of scale and cost efficiencies EU spending brings. However, the European Parliament's current arrangements are indefensible. The UK government's coalition agreement clearly stipulates the pledge that as a UK government we will press for a single seat in Brussels. Thus, I can only support the wish of the majority of MEPs, shown by continuous and consistent voting, to cut costs and organise their work more efficiently. Ahead of the 2014 European elections, MEPs have broken the code of silence surrounding the wasteful travelling circus to Strasbourg. It's now time for a wake-up call within the European Council of Ministers too. I was pleased to learn that we've been joined on that front by the Belgian Foreign Minister Didier Reynders, recently calling for the need to stop the shuttles to Strasbourg. The home of the European Parliament indeed is in Brussels, where the other key EU bodies, the European Commission and the European Council, are also based. At a time when Member States are continuing discussions on the multi-annual financial framework for 2014 to 2020, the message coming from the European Parliament must be a clear one. When looking for cuts and a freeze in future spending, start by tackling the waste involved with the current working arrangements of the European Parliament. There are always times to be tough in politics, but I believe that we deliver much more when we come together in the honest search for solutions to the problems and challenges that we all face. Every political institution must go through processes of renewal, improvement and change in order to continue to remain effective and to retain the democratic legitimacy of the people we are elected to represent. This is as true in Westminster as it is across all European capitals, and it must also be true at the European level. Strasbourg is a truly beautiful and great city, as well as a symbol of the reconciliation between France and Germany after decades of war and bloody conflict. But the people of Strasbourg deserve a stable and solid arrangement for the role their city plays within the EU, not the surge of 750 MEPs and thousands of staffers descending on it for a few days every month. I would like to thank my party colleague, Vice President Edward Macmillan-Scott, for today's event, as well as for driving the single seat campaign as a whole. Ahead of the 2014 elections, we will be able to show our constituents that we Liberal Democrats fight for an effective European Union and a better European Parliament in Brussels. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. I didn't ask him to put the last bit in. So now I hand over to David Earnshaw.
Thank you very much. In this last session, I want to look forward to the election campaign. We have about 20 months to go, 17 or 18 more trips to Strasbourg during this mandate. So I want to try to set the context for the election campaign, and I want to give you some ideas and some thoughts about whether candidates' support for a single seat could make a difference. We know that this House is 5-1 in support of a single seat. We know that most of the staff are too. I want to start off this part of the discussion by looking at the challenge of turnout, by saying a few words about what we know about voter apathy, and I want to address the idea of whether a single seat would resonate with voters. I want to look at how the Brussels, Strasbourg, Luxembourg issue might play with the electorate. There is a turnout challenge. As we know, for overall the last European elections, there has been a secular decline in turnout. If there is consistently low turnout, the legitimacy of this House is undermined. It was a leader of the EPP, Wilfried Martens, who said that in some member states the legitimacy of the Parliament is being put into question by low turnout. It doesn't mean there's been a single linear process of decline. Some member states had a higher turnout in 2004 than in 1999. Similarly, in the United Kingdom in 2004, the turnout was up on the preceding 5 elections. But nevertheless, clearly the trend is down. Why low turnout? Here's 7 reasons. Indifference, apathy and ignorance are right at the top of the list. There's an image problem. But it's not the usual kind of image problem. It's that the European Parliament hasn't got an image. There's a focus on national politics. There's a dissatisfaction with politics in general. There's seen to be less at stake in European elections. Traditionally, this might be changing. European elections have a declining resonance with voters. And clearly, there's a lack of personality. There's a lack of party leaders. Again, this might be changing, and I will come back to that later. Looking at the recent Eurobarometer, trust in the European Union is now at its lowest level ever. It is almost as low as trust in national governments and national parliaments. There's more bad news. According to Eurobarometer, Europeans know only very little about the functioning of the European Union and its institutions. More than a third of citizens cannot name 3 EU institutions. There's some good news. The European Parliament is the institution most often mentioned by respondents to Eurobarometer, and more than half of them can name the European Parliament. First, and a third, the Central Bank, and a quarter, the European Commission. More than an absolute majority of Europeans believe that the European Parliament is the institution that best represents the European Union. But there's a challenge to retain confidence. More than 2/3 of citizens still believe that the European Parliament plays an important role, but that number is down. Support is weak. And I think it's true to say that there's not many MEPs, if any, that haven't had to justify the monthly trek between Strasbourg and Brussels. If we look at the European Parliament elections of the past, just before the 2009 European elections, so in early 2008, 75% of respondents said they didn't know when the European election was. Some months later, 67% didn't know when the European election was. Similarly, the interest in elections, more than 50% of respondents were not interested, were disinterested. There's good news as well this time round. Already, apparently, 25% of the electorate know that the elections are in June 2014. That is progress. Economic crisis also means that there is more interest in the European Union. However, economic crisis brings new expectations. Expectations now are clearly about not wasting money. Citizens also have stronger opinions than ever about the European Union and about waste. So let me just look a little bit at the British case. I know that the United Kingdom is a special case, but it might be a little bit instructive. A recent opinion poll done by YouGov for the European Council on Foreign Relations by Peter Kellner looked at the British electorate and described it as divided between worried nationalists, pragmatic nationalists and progressive internationalists. It's the kind of split which I think is probably not that different from many of what we find in many of our countries today. And it's the people in the middle, the pragmatic nationalists, whose support rests on issues like accountability and utility, the utility of the European Union, which includes issues like a single seat. The case for a single seat is about value for money, effectiveness, democracy, accountability, environmental sustainability. These are exactly the kind of attributes that appeal to what YouGov and Peter Kellner call the pragmatic nationalists in the United Kingdom. Elsewhere in Europe, we might call them the utilitarian Europeans. It's that bulk in the middle who see Europe not in terms of symbols and ideas and values and culture and the symbolism of Franco-German reconciliation, but the utilitarian Europeans who want Europe to deliver, who want Europe to deliver in times of economic crisis. So using this in 2014, support for the single seat, arguably, gets this middle ground out to vote. And they spread fairly evenly, I think, across the parties. The visibility of a Commission presidency candidate also would see turnout rise. And I think it's also true to say that the public are watching more than ever before. They don't want to see waste today. The public are looking for savings in public administration. The public is not looking for symbols. talked a little bit earlier about how we see Strasbourg. The public are not against Strasbourg as a great tourist destination, but I fear they might be against a parliament which is a tourist parliament. Finally, for members, the single seat campaign, as you will all have seen and many of you have used this week and yesterday in particular, has got a number of campaign materials. Some of them are up here, logos, twibbons for Twitter, the website, badges, etc. Many of these materials are available. If you want to use them, please contact the single seat campaign. A final word, a very final word. If I was advising Strasbourg, and somebody asked me to mention this briefly, if I was advising Strasbourg, I think they have to start seeing the future. They need a plan. Because clearly, as somebody said in the last session, the current situation cannot continue. So there does need to be thinking about the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. So we'll continue now with the third panel. And first speaker would be Anna Corazza-Bildt, please.
Bonjour tout le monde. D'abord, je voulais saluer et remercier les participants de Strasbourg, de l'Alsace, de la France qui sont là avec nous. Merci. Je voudrais aussi rendre hommage à Jean Quatremer qui risque la cour martiale pour être avec nous. C'est fantastique. Pourquoi je dis ça? Parce que je suis membre du Parti populaire. Je suis fière d'être membre du comité de soutien pour la campagne de un siège pour le Parlement européen. Et pourquoi? Parce que nous avons les citoyens de l'Europe avec nous. Quand je suis dans les réunions, quand je rencontre les citoyens sur les médias sociaux, mais aussi dans les villes, dans les rues de France et du reste de l'Europe et de la Suède, où je suis élue comme italienne, toujours, quel que soit le sujet dont on traite, je reçois la question, je reçois les commentaires, je reçois des indications d'irritation forte pour la question que nous avons 2 sièges. Ce qui me fait le plus de la peine, qu'en francophone et francophile, c'est qu'il y a des sentiments anti-français, il y a des sentiments anti-Strasbourg qui continuent à être alimentés, qui divisent l'Europe, qui augmentent les préjugés, qui augmentent les stéréotypes contre la France. Ça, je ne le veux pas. Cette campagne, mon cher ami Ashley Fox, n'est pas une campagne contre la France, n'est pas une campagne contre l'Alsace, n'est pas une campagne contre Strasbourg. La voie n'est pas la confrontation, la voie est le dialogue. Merci d'être là et parler avec nous. Venez plus nombreux, dites ce que vous pensez, débattez avec nous dans tous les forums démocratiques que le grand pays que la France est, que ce Parlement vous donne la possibilité. Nous voulons trouver une solution avec la France, avec les Français. Une solution qui soit positive pour les citoyens de Strasbourg, pour les citoyens de l'Alsace, pour tout le peuple français. Il n'y a pas d'autre voie. Alors ma question c'est, est-ce que vraiment les Français pensent que ce Parlement est plus démocratique parce qu'il a 2 sièges, dont l'un est à Strasbourg? Est-ce que vraiment les citoyens de l'Alsace pensent qu'ils sont mieux représentés, que les ressources que la France met pour les institutions européennes sont mieux utilisées parce qu'une partie de nos décisions se prend ici? Est-ce qu'ils pensent vraiment qu'en moment de crise, où on leur demande des sacrifices, où on demande à tout le monde de serrer la ceinture, c'est pensable de continuer à dépenser 180 millions d'euros, de jeter dans l'environnement 19 000 tonnes de CO2? Est-ce que c'est vraiment ce que les Français veulent? Alors moi, quand on pense au futur, je crois que notre devoir, c'est de répondre à la confiance que nous avons eue des citoyens européens. Nous représentons tout le monde, nous représentons 500 millions d'habitants en Europe. Et je vois mon devoir et ma responsabilité de façon très pragmatique de continuer cette bataille avec vous. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup et tack så mycket, Anna. Thank you very, very much for your contribution. Next we would have Dan Jørgensen, SND, and from Denmark, please.
Thank you. Earlier I was reminded of a small anecdote. I think about 10 years ago, the former Prime Minister of the UK, Margaret Thatcher, was here in the Parliament visiting. And this was, of course, years after she resigned, but she gave a speech, and after the speech there was a Q&A session, and one of the colleagues from our socialist group, Mr. Michel Rocard, a Frenchman, asked her, "So, Mrs. Thatcher, when do you think the UK will abandon the pound and join the euro?" And she said, "Not in a million years." To which Mr. Rocard answered, "I interpret your answer in the way that we agree on the principles but disagree on the timing." I was reminded of this because very often if you ask members of government in many European countries, I know definitely in my own, they will say that they of course support our struggle here to have a single seat. But when you then ask them, why don't you demand it? They say, well, the timing is not right. This is not, we're negotiating MFF now. It's too sensitive, we cannot do it. The thing is, I think the timing probably is right at this minute. Why? Well, we have bigger support in the parliament than we've ever had. So the democratic argument is there. Also, we are in the middle of a crisis. So the argument for savings is definitely there. And we might also be facing a change of the treaties anyway. This will need a treaty change. So if we combine this change that we are arguing for here with whatever will be on the table, we will also have the very almost unlikely situation that might actually be a popular treaty change. In my own country, where treaty changes normally go to a referendum, I would definitely like to go out there and argue in the workplaces and schools and institutions here. Can you please help us vote for a single seat for the European Parliament? I think that would be a treaty referendum that we could actually win pretty easily. Now, the question for this panel was, how do we get the public aboard? I think they are already aboard, really. I think what we need to do is transform the public support into public pressure on the politicians and the governments. I think most of the governments in Europe already agree with our quest here, but the thing is, it's too easy for them not to do anything. It doesn't have any consequences for them not to do anything. Now that will change as soon as the public demand is strong enough. How do we do that? Well, making a campaign like this is one step. And I think that the media attention that we will get from this campaign in the different countries is a very good example of what we need to do more of. We need also, I think, to try and see if we can engage the individual ministers in the governments. We need to see if we can engage maybe, I don't know, celebrities, people, for intellectuals, people that engage in public debate. Because we have all the arguments on our side, so basically it's just getting them out there, and then the public support will also be there. Then we will have the pressure, and then maybe we can also have the support to offer Strasbourg something different, as was discussed in the last session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. I believe you're quite right. We've seen a lot of support from citizens in different member countries. Right now, I know by heart we had, in a country like the Netherlands, for example, already 500,000 people, similar sizes in countries like Finland, and now if you see that in relation to citizenship, it's incredible. But next speaker would be Diane Dodds from the UK and non-attached member here in the House.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our colleagues for chairing this. It is a pleasure to be here and to be part of this panel. I want to address a very particular aspect of this and really ties in with what David gave in his presentation. Sometimes we in Strasbourg, in Brussels, in the European institutions in general, engage in a conversation with ourselves. And much as that conversation with ourselves may well be very interesting and can create a lot of attention within ourselves, we really do need to engage in a conversation with European citizens, with our own constituents, and within the parliaments of our member states. And I believe that the momentum within the European Parliament is such that the case for a single seat is almost inexorable. It will come eventually because there is a lot of pressure in that. But what we do need to have is pressure within the Council and pressure within our own member states and an awareness within with our constituents. Let's be honest as well, most of our constituents are not really concerned. It is not uppermost in their day-to-day lives where I am at this particular minute, whether I'm in Strasbourg or in Brussels. We have to be absolutely honest. They are concerned about their family, about their jobs, about the economic crisis. They're concerned about the future of their young people, whether there will be a job, whether education is sufficient, as one other contributor has mentioned. These are the things that are uppermost in our constituents' minds. However, the issue of the single seat for me is symbolic of something that we need to put right with our constituents and with Europe in general. And that is about, as David has talked about, the cutting out the waste, being more efficient, being more responsive, being absolutely able to respond to constituents' needs. And it is not about being a parliament that goes on a trip every once a month in order to fulfill the obligations of the treaty. So I think that we really have to we've had the conversation with ourselves. Our votes in Parliament show that we are in favour of it, and we do need to have the conversation within our member states and with our constituents. Can I say as well, I think that there are important points coming up right now. As our other contributors said, the timing is right. We have the MFF negotiations. What is wrong with making some inroads into the single seat issue with the MFF timetable? And I, for one, will be asking my party colleagues in the House of Commons to raise the issue at Prime Minister's questions within the avenues that they have open to them then. We have, as Ashley Fox, in the United Kingdom, and I hate to think that this might be coming a bit of a UK thing, we have the option in the United Kingdom of having an e-petition and then having the issue debated in Parliament. We should be encouraging our constituents to sign the e-petition, to get it on the parliamentary agenda at a national level as well. And we have, probably for us, in our own way, the most important opportunity to have that conversation with our constituents. And of course that is within the up and coming elections. And yes, David, I do believe that a candidate for election in the European election in 2014 can go to the electorate and say, I am standing here and I pledge to you that I will support a single seat, that I will support something that cuts out waste, that streamlines our bureaucracy, and that helps us to be more efficient in this European Parliament. For my own personal level, I will also, so that no one is in any doubt, in the United Kingdom context, I will stand on the issue of a referendum. And I will be openly for a referendum within the United Kingdom, because I do believe, and I take very seriously, that we do need to settle the question within a United Kingdom context, because, as we say, support for Europe there is at a low ebb. Thank you for coming today. I think this is a very, very important debate, and I hope that the next level of our debate will be with our constituents, with our national parliaments, and that we can take and make sure that the pressure is applied at that level as well. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Diane. I think the day today already has shown that it is not another pure British issue. We have members from so many member states speaking, and we have colleagues from across all 26 member states being very, very heavily involved. I must admit, if we would have a further panel, one day I would wish to have also a French colleague to be able to discuss this issue. But last and certainly not least, I'm happy also to welcome Marisa Matisse, which has in absence already been mentioned because you're working on a report and carrying the idea to suggest the EIT to be located in Strasbourg. I'm not sure if that is what you will speak about now, but I'm sure he will enlighten us. Please, you have the floor. Well, from Portugal and from the GUE Left Party.
Hi everyone, I'm so sorry that I came late, but unfortunately today we shouldn't work, as they say, because of the treaties, but my agenda is a nightmare, so I'm so sorry for arriving late, and I have to depart as soon as I finish to talk with you. I know that a lot of things have already been said. I know that a lot of proposals have already been presented. In the report that I'm being responsible at this moment for the strategic innovation agenda, which includes the EIT, I made a clear proposal to include the EIT together with other innovation and research institutes across Europe to be located here in Strasbourg. And I know that this proposal was already mentioned and discussed, so I don't want to take additional time of your time just to repeat again the things that have been said. I just want to tell you, to underline some of the things which have been said here now by some other people before me. And when we propose things, alternative things to Strasbourg, is not because we don't like Strasbourg or France. By the contrary, I think it's because we like this city and we like these buildings that it is a pity that we look to these buildings only occupied 40 days each year. It's about 1 month per year that we occupy these magnificent buildings. And I wonder if it's reasonable to us to say that this city deserves only 40 days per year of occupation with interesting European debates. But there are other alternatives, as it was said, my proposal on the EIT, that there's the proposal on the Committee of Regions. So that's not because we lack alternatives or we lack proposals. It's because we are putting our heads in the sand and we don't discuss these issues. And honestly, I do think that either we bring these issues seriously to the stake, or citizens will take it from their own responsibility. They will discuss it because it's not reasonable, and I would like to say that's a question of being reasonable about the resources, the means, and the effectiveness of our work. As it was said before, it's not because we are in Brussels or in Strasbourg that we do better or we do worse. For the voters, for those who want to be represented in this institution, is not a question of place. And unfortunately, some of the member states are now facing huge austerity measures, like is the case of Portugal. It's becoming quite difficult and more difficult that we say to everyone that you need to make sacrifices, we need to do a lot of cuts, you need to pay from your salaries. But no, we are not available to discuss any kind of costs associated with our activity because we don't want to change, because our karma is not to change. So I think in order to be reasonable as well, according to the sacrifices we are asking to people in order to get out of the crisis, we need to think about economic and the environmental consequences as well. So thank you so much, and sorry, but I have to leave again. I just came here to say that I think this is a very important debate, and let's take out our heads from the sand, because either we do it or citizens will do it by us.
Thank you very much. And as time is running, I can agree it was one of the interesting debates we had on this topic, certainly also because it was the first one in such a huge format. We are under serious time pressure because, again, we will have to keep moving. This room is occupied afterwards, so I have to hand over to Edward McMillan-Scott immediately for closing remarks. And I would ask just the panelists to remain for a moment. Please.
Thank you very much indeed, Alexander. Well, this has been a very interesting afternoon with some really quite insightful and fascinating contributions from colleagues and from experts. The subject of the single seat is not going to go away. I think that the fact that we have driving the process of discussion, a single-seat steering group which is cross-party, it's multinational, it's committed, and it's pro-European. It's not our wish to make trouble for anybody, but it is our wish to make for a more efficient European Parliament able to deal with the challenges of the Lisbon Treaty, and what this conference is partly about is to use that treaty to achieve change, and also to look at the European elections to come. As Marisa Matias has just said, I think our people will expect us to respect their point of view and to share their pain, and part of it is by cutting the enormous cost of the additional working places of the European Parliament. We did indeed, to come to Alexander's point, invite French colleagues from the European Parliament to join us on these panels. We don't have any French members on the steering group, but unfortunately nobody would do so. There is a French point of view, very clearly. Jean Quatremer is a specialist commentator. As he explained, he shifted his position a couple of years ago, motivated by the same wish that we have, that the European Parliament should be more effective, especially under its new responsibilities of the Lisbon Treaty. I've watched over years the European Parliament. I was first elected in 1984. I said at the time, and I've gone on saying it ever since, until the European Parliament has the right to choose when and where it meets, it will not be taken fully seriously by the public. This week, we've seen a number of activities centered around the single seat. And I believe that the European Parliament is showing unprecedented unity of purpose, not just about the issue of working more efficiently through a single seat, but also, most importantly, addressing Council with a timetable. June the 13th, 2013 is the deadline by which we want real progress on this issue. It's got to be taken up by governments. We've heard some this afternoon in the videos. And I'm glad that those people said what they said, led by Radek Sikorski in Berlin a few months ago, but being picked up by others. And what we will try and do not only is to maintain the process in the European Parliament, and as somebody said, we mustn't just talk to ourselves, talking to the politicians elsewhere at national level, talking to the heads of government, making this an issue which they have to address, because that's what the public would expect us to do. So I'd like, if I may, just to close by thanking all the speakers this afternoon, the moderators, I'm sorry Lucas hasn't turned up, and the panelists from the single-seat steering group. I'd like to thank the Parliament staff who've helped with this process, and also to the team from ALDE who prepared this conference, to Sveti, to Irit, to Neil, to Angelica, to Axel, Lucien, and to Jan Peter, all for their different contributions this week, but it's been a fantastically successful conference. I'm really grateful, finally, to all of you who are watching on the web stream, for watching and for participating from whatever background you may come. Thank you all for being here.
Very good.